Good morning, y'all. This is Bud Elliott of the Nolecast. If you're watching us on YouTube, have a little camera issue, so I'm just going to go audio only so that we can get this out to you. This is the Florida State at SMU preview. Game will kick off uh, pretty late, actually, so it'll be on ACC Network, and it'll be an interesting ball game to watch. First, I want to start though by sending Graham and I's, heartfelt prayers and well wishes to everybody impacted by the hurricane. I mean, obviously we have gone through that before, and like we know how it is, and it frankly it sucks, and so we do pray for y'all that you're safe, and if you're without power or shelter that you're able to find it soon, man. So uh, we send our love. Let's hope that this pod can be a momentary distraction from you if you are in a bad situation, which we know that some of y'all probably are. SMU comes into today with only one loss on the season and a couple of nice wins. They are riding very high after getting a win over TCU, which is their main rival there. They call it the Iron Skillet game. And they blew TCU out like crazy. I mean, they scored 60 points, and it was not a particularly close game in terms of the scoreboard. Now, I will note here that TCU might might be a bit of a fraud. And from a Florida State perspective, that's pretty important to note. So they beat TCU 66-42, which is impressive. However, I will also note that SMU had more turnover EPA in their favor than any team in the country last week, including a full standard deviation higher than the second place team in that stat. Does that mean that they were not deserving of the win in that ball game? No, certainly does not. Does that mean that they probably should not have won the game 66-42? Eh, kind of, yeah, but maybe not entirely, right? Um, they are an interesting ball club. I'll get into this in a second, but they also had a special team score in the game, right? So you take a look at that, and I mean they're getting up. They go their first three scores in the game that gives them the massive play from ahead advantage. 51-yard field goal, 51-yard fumble return touchdown, 69-yard punt return touchdown. Then they had a scoring drive of 68 yards and a scoring drive of 60 yards, a pick six, and then another bomb field goal of 49 yards. So, yeah. Then they had a 1 yard touchdown drive, which is pretty nice. There's no doubt. And then they had a 47-yard field goal as well. So, when I run my data every week, I'm like, wow, I'm not saying that TCU deserved to win the ball game, that SMU did not. Uh, but at the same time, there are some things that make this SMU team a little bit more beatable for a good football team. Is FSU a good football team right now? Not really. No, I don't think so. Not with the way that their offense is playing. But SMU and TCU are certainly a little closer, I think, than the score indicated. So let's thank our sponsor, the legendary team, 844 FSU Loan, 844 FSU Loan. Chad does an awesome job securing loans. I think 600 Nolecast listeners or damn near have decided to choose Chad. And I've done it twice. I would certainly do it again. 844 FSU Loan, 844 FSU Loan is that number to call. All right. So SMU is a team that I was fading a lot early in this season, and a team that I was not very high on coming into the season, mainly because I didn't really think that their personnel was that good and that some of the people who they had lost to Power Five programs would be difficult to replace. One thing I was not entirely sure about, but I got some intel on early in the season, was that the backup quarterback, Kevin Jennings, might legitimately be the better player compared to the starter, or the starter at the time, Preston Stone. Jennings, if you recall, came in for the American Conference Championship game and actually won the ball game. when Preston Stone got injured with I think it was a broken leg. I'm trying to remember exactly what the injury was. Anyway, but I had a pretty good source who I do trust say that, hey, there's a significant number of players on the team who would prefer Kevin Jennings. And if you watched this SMU team, they certainly did play in that fashion early on. They allowed a ton of pressure, particularly on Stone. I mean, he played quite poorly against Nevada overall. Some of the numbers maybe not show it because Nevada does have some weaknesses. Because obviously it's sorry, Nevada, not Nevada. Anyway, um, but they would start to rotate Jennings in, and you could basically tell that because SMU's offensive line allows a lot of pressure, that you need a guy who's more mobile behind there because Stone is basically a sitting duck. He's in fact quite similar in some ways to how DJU had been playing this year. So finally, SMU made the decision to go ahead and bench Stone, and they bit the bullet and went ahead and did it. And that has been a pretty good decision. Now, it came after the BYU game, and it's not like Jennings played super well against BYU either. BYU has a very nice defense this year. Jennings was 15 of 32 for 140 yards, so 47%, 4.4 average, and one interception. BYU was a little lucky in that game to get as many turnovers in their favor as they did. But, hey, turnover luck doesn't always kind of even out over the course of the season. But Jennings running around has been pretty good. Jennings passing has been decent against Nevada. He was 4 or 5, or Nevada, excuse me, for 10.8 per attempt. And against TCU, he was 7.2 per attempt, which that's not good, but it's not terrible. SMU is going to operate at a very high tempo. I think in some ways it is probably helpful that this game is at night because it won't be quite so hot there in Dallas when FSU shows up. But certainly a formidable team. Offensively, they have some important weapons that you probably need to know about here. So I think the best player on their entire team is this guy named RJ Maryland. He is the son of former Miami Hurricanes defensive tackle Russell Maryland, and he's really good. They spam him as a tight end basically as much as Michigan does to Colston Loveland or Penn State does to Tyler Warren. Maybe not quite what Georgia did to Brock Bowers, but they're going to run him out a whole lot. The other guys on their team are okay. I don't think they're necessarily amazing. They were really good for the American Conference level, which is what SMU was in last year before it joined the ACC. Romello Brinson and Brashard Smith are former Miami Hurricanes. Jake Bailey and Jordan Hudson have some ability. But I think the best guy on their team is tight end Russell Maryland, which I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but Florida State has not necessarily covered tight ends and running backs all that well this year. So it's going to be a challenge. Now, last week, I will note that Florida State handled Cal pretty well in terms of taking care of Cal's spread offense. Cal did have 400 yards, but it was not on a super high yards per play. They allowed Cal to get some yards underneath and then ultimately forced field goals. The frustrating part, obviously, is that Cal converted way too many third and long situations. And this SMU offense, I would say, is a pretty good bit better than what Cal runs out there. But there is definitely the chance that Florida State's defensive line shows up and dominates SMU's offensive line like it did to Cal. And that can cause quite a few problems. If you watch, Nevada, excuse me, sorry guys, had some success against this offensive line. In fact, quite a bit of success. BYU had a ton of success really whipping this offensive line. TCU does not have a good defensive line this year. They have had numerous injuries in the early part of the season and in preseason camp that hurt their ability to rush the passer and to stop the run. And TCU ran for 238 on them. Jennings was just 41 of that, probably a little more if you take out the sacks. But it's a very different challenge for SMU this week playing Florida State because Florida State is, I think, the way they're playing right now, far and away the best defensive line that SMU will have faced. And we have seen this offense crater quite a bit when it gets behind the chains. There are some challenges. As I mentioned, Maryland, Florida State has also really struggled this year with some of the mobile quarterback stuff and some of the QB run stuff. Mendoza for Cal was not really able to present that threat last week. So, yeah, like that is definitely something we're going to be watching here to see just how well FSU can defend some of the QB run stuff because Jennings is so much more mobile than Preston Stone was. Definitely something we're going to be keeping an eye on there. But for FSU to win this game, they're going to have their defensive front eat up SMU, and they're going to have to just not allow coverage busts in the back end. And we'll see how that goes, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I have tremendous confidence that they will do so. I have tremendous confidence that they can do so. Like the ability is there. Will the performance match the ability? I'm not sure. Will Marvin Jones Jr. continue to play as he did last week? I thought last week he had some really nice moments, right? Will Pat Payton and Josh Farmer continue to play as well as they did last week? I mean, Josh Farmer, I know Cal was banged up on the interior of the offensive line, but it's not illegal to go ham when you have a favorable matchup. And indeed, I thought he did that quite nicely. Let's go ahead and talk about Congruity. CongruityHR.com/Knowles. Matt Lewis, an awesome, awesome asset to your business. Let's optimize all parts of your business. Let's get this thing going. Payroll, HR solutions, whatever you need, give Matt Lewis a call. I think you could become maybe the 10th Nolecast business to work with Matt Lewis. So very successful partnership there on our part, and I'm excited to see that continue. Just click the link in our show notes. Boom, it's right there. Apologies for the kids' sound in the background. If you guys are picking that up, I don't know if the mic is, but we don't have school today, as I think many of y'all across the state probably do not. All right, so the other side of the coin here is still certainly a concern. I mean, the over-under on this game is 46, 47, and the spread is 6, right? So they're kind of projecting like a 27-20 SMU type game. I think a really good effort from FSU's defense would be to hold SMU to 20 points. I don't think it's really realistic to hold them into the teens. Maybe it is. Like if you just have a ridiculously dominant effort up front, but probably not due to the tempo at which SMU runs, but also due to FSU's offense inability to hold on to the ball. And I don't mean fumbling. I mean to possess the ball and to go on sustained drives. I don't think Florida State will want to play in a big time tempo matchup here with SMU, simply because that probably plays more into the favor and comfort zone that the Mustangs would want to play with. TCU, now granted, it was on quite a few plays. It was 78 plays, but they put up almost 500 yards on 78 and 42 points, and most of that was earned. They did not run the ball well at all. TCU so far this year cannot run the ball, but man, it can pass it. And it's a really good passing team, far better than what FSU is. SMU's defense, though, has been run on a couple times this year. Nevada had some success running the football against the Mustangs. BYU certainly had a good bit of success running it. I will note that both Nevada and BYU were in favorable game states in these games. And I really can't overstate how important I think that might be when playing SMU. SMU with a lead is capable of being a real bully and piling on. They want to take these play action shots because they know you have to honor the run game because, hey, you're down. And, if you're up, run the ball cool. Like that eats the clock. Run game is typically like lower EPA. It's less efficient than passing the ball. Whatever. But if you're up, absolutely have to stop the run because it runs the clock and it impacts your ability to get the ball back. So getting off to some kind of fast start here and finding a lead in this game, I do think is pretty important. My guess here is that the team that scores first wins the ball game. That's not a real bold guess. That typically is how college football games play out, but particularly in this matchup, I do think there is something there to that because Florida State playing from behind, you don't really have to honor the run game at all. It falls more on the shoulders of this pass game, which is a problem, I think, for a lot of folks, especially this passing offense, right? Um, and we'll have to see how this passing offense evolves. And like, will they be physical in the receiver blocking game? Will DJU be able to be a little more decisive in some of the RPO stuff? I am certainly encouraged by the improved play from Ely, or sorry, my bad, excuse me. I'm certainly encouraged by the improved play from the offensive line in this game against Cal. And I do think that Cal's defense is better than SMU's defense based on what I have seen so far. SMU's defense has not been super physical, but they are pretty aggressive. They are definitely going to sell out for turnovers. And I do worry about a bit of a snowball effect here for DJU in this offense. He not exactly a guy that's played with a ton of composure so far this year. And really, I don't want to single him out in that criticism. I think it has been a lot of the offense, including maybe the staff there. So we will see how they're able to play. Do they take more of what worked last week in the run game? Some of the straight ahead stuff, less of the puller stuff against a team in SMU that likes to blitz a whole lot, and see if they can get some kind of momentum with that. With Cam Davis, obviously with Roydell being out and missing excessive time, we're going to see that. So Cam Davis and Toa Philly show for sure. Maybe you mix in some Holmes or Singleton or something like that in this ball game, but a little lightning and thunder between Davis and Toa Philly is probably what the doctor ordered. Could this be a big Hakeem Williams game? Right? I don't know. And last week was his first like full week back, and he had some decent moments, and he had some moments that he still needs to grow from. I think the fact that they're throwing him out there is pretty big. I just, can you find a way to score 24 points? I mean, what if SMU's offense continues to click again with Jennings? I mean, they've made the correct switch. He is a much better fit and player for this SMU offense as it is currently constructed. I don't know if I want to say that he's definitely better than Stone overall, but maybe he is. And for right now, I think it's unquestionable. I've watched all the SMU games so far this year, with the lone exception of their FCS contest, which I didn't really feel like I needed to watch. Like, can you score 24? Can you score 27? I think your range of outcomes here that allow you to win the game is kind of small, absent just a phenomenal defensive effort. I mean, this is an offense that I believe has not cracked 300 yards so far this year. It's an offense that has scored what, 2 touchdowns once, I think. Just not really an offense that is functional, and you're probably going to need 3 touchdowns and some bomb field goals, or 4 touchdowns in this game. Maybe those come via turnovers. I will note that Kevin Jennings is not immune from throwing turnover-worthy passes, and some of those could end up in interceptions potentially, and they have not always done so this year. I mean, he did throw one against BYU, but there were some throws against BYU that also could have been picked for sure and were dropped. And I think, TCU, obviously you're playing with such a positive game script. And by game script, I just mean favorable situation as far as the scoreboard and the time on the clock, that you really shouldn't be putting the ball in harm's way at all. That's just crazy. But can the defense get some turnovers in this one to force some short fields? Can you win the special teams battle? I mean, clearly both teams have elite kickers here based on how they have performed so far this year. You're probably going to need a really good punting game from Mastromano. And can you just be more physical? I think that is your greatest hope. TCU is not a team, I think, just based on who they've lost to injury in the preseason, during the season, and to the transfer portal in the offseason. Remember, they lost Williams, the probably the top defensive tackle target in the portal, to Oklahoma over the summer. So TCU was not a team that was set up to take care of business here and play SMU in that way and be physical. Florida State, at least defensively, I think could be, and we'll have to watch to see how that plays out. I hope you're watching from Madison Social, from Township, from Charlie Park. Awesome restaurants brought to you by Matt Thompson, our longtime sponsor here on the Nolecast. Drinks, brunch, awesome night out, get a good meal, Charlie Park, rooftop. I mean, that's the jam, dude. It's pretty awesome. Mad So for game day, no doubt. Township is a spot. Like I know a lot of people who went up for Parents Weekend had some awesome things to say, and we really appreciate you guys listening and staying with us. I hope this preview finds you well, and we definitely keep you in our thoughts and prayers. Let's go ahead and all right. So we talked who needs to have a big game defensively. I think this probably needs to be a big Hakeem game for you, but I would still try to take some shots over the top to Benson for sure. I think that SMU is actually gettable there with some of the hard play action stuff. Again, you got to stay in a bit of a neutral game state. Maybe some of the more downhill running that you were able to accomplish last week, maybe that allows you to have a little more effective play action because SMU's probably seen that and would expect more downhill running. So maybe some of the play action stuff off that. At least if you throw a pick in that situation, it's like a punt, right? Assuming you tackle the guy. Like if you're throwing the ball 40 or 50 yards down the field in the air, like it's basically a punt if it fails. So anyway, let's get a score prediction. I will say, whew, um, hmm, I will say SMU 24, Florida State 17. I need to see some actual signs of life from this offense until I'm going to pick FSU to crack 20 points against a good team or an okay team, I guess, on the road. And I worry here that the defense needs to play almost a perfect game. We'll see if they can. I don't know. Maybe they will. I hope I'm wrong in this prediction. I'll join you after the ball game for a reaction, either super late Saturday night or Sunday morning. We will figure that out. And again, best wishes to y'all, and I'll see you next time on the Nolecast.